Good morning, everyone. It is February 19th, 2020. Good morning, USA. Good morning, world. I'll just wait to see if anyone else is going to come on. So, again, there's a lot happening. And, of course, we have Bernie Sanders pulling ahead of the pack since New Hampshire and Iowa, which I think happened 4 years ago as well. We have Biden falling behind and fighting with Elizabeth Warren for second place and waiting to jostle for position or jockeying for position for the Nevada caucus and South Carolina Democratic primary. And then, of course, we have California Democratic primary March 3rd, which all of the voters, including myself, voted to move earlier. Normally it's in June. So this is going to be an interesting year, folks. Buckle up. The Democratic convention is going to pop. There's going to be fireworks. And I really hope that the public will be able to see what's going on and there's transparency. So now we have Mike Bloomberg, who is hitting the trail with a lot of money and, as we all know, and commercials. Also, of course, is the opposition to Bloomberg now coming out from the Trump side as well as probably the progressive side. Not probably, as well as the progressive side. And it's not that hard to oppose him because he's been on tape saying things about Black and Latino males, saying that they don't know how to behave at a job. That was in 2011. And then there was another thing that he said on camera, which was that Black people represent the overwhelming majority of those who commit crimes. He even said they commit crimes against each other. And then he said they also take up most of the prison space. I mean, it was really shocking to hear this last night when I was cooking, when I was making dinner. Here we go. 95% of your murderers and murder victims fit one MO. You can just take the description, Xerox it, and pass it out to all the cops. They're male, minorities, 16 to 25. That's true in New York. That's true in virtually every city. And that's where the real crime is. So, of course, we also know he's had some sexual harassment lawsuits where in court the plaintiff testified that he made many callous and coarse remarks to and about women. Now, what's the difference between him and Trump? Well, he's betting that his record at creating jobs is going to catapult him over these accusations. However, I foresee, again, fireworks, and I'm not sure how we can avoid this because a lot of people are going to back Bloomberg simply because they want him to defeat Trump and they don't think Bernie Sanders can. Another reason that Democrats will be opposing Bernie Sanders is that they oppose the policies of democratic socialism, quote socialism, democratic socialism that Bernie and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez espouse. And they oppose socialism for a different reason, though, than Trump does. They oppose socialism, in my opinion, because they don't want to relinquish control. It was a real wake-up call when Barack Obama, the front runner right before the election, he met with President George W. Bush and John McCain to discuss the financial crisis and the plummeting and debacle involving Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers. And I remember thinking, this is really going to ruin, everything. I mean, Obama's coming in, he's going to change everything, and now he's having to work with Bush? Oh my God, and then sure enough, after the bailout and after the election, he called the bankers to the White House. And if you watch the PBS Frontline documentary about it, everyone was expecting him to really be hard on these bankers, as he could have been. That would have been the time. But he wasn't. He just basically was like, don't do that again. And we went on, business as usual, with quantitative easing that was absolutely necessary, as well as huge buybacks of all of these toxic, diseased, mortgage-backed securities that have been repackaged and sold to people all over the world. Basically selling slices of debt of the American people who were underqualified for buying a home. And then Barack Obama appointed Timothy Geithner and forget Lawrence's name, but they were both banking people. And I thought to myself, okay, that's not good. That's going in the wrong direction. Of course, trust in Obama and his campaign. Well, we all know that it was pretty much business as usual, slap on the wrist, for these bankers. Now, Bernie Sanders emerges. He says a lot of the right things. The main thing that Bernie Sanders says, and that AOC also says now, is that how are we going to pay for healthcare for all, Medicare for all? We're going to stop fighting unnecessary wars. And they're absolutely right. The unnecessary wars and the defense budget take up majority of the federal budget after Social Security, government pensions, Medicare and Medicaid. So absolutely, the defense budget has been out of control. The Department of Defense hasn't been able to reconcile their accounts for decades. And obviously, we're not running things very intelligently. So whatever ideological approach we have, if we decide, yes, we're going to take this and divert it to caring for our people, which is absolutely noble and wonderful, well, we better make sure that we're also not just doing the same old thing that we've always done, which is inflated contracts and overpaying contractors and the wrong people and not accounting for where the money's going. The stimulus that Obama bragged about in his tweet a couple of days ago, that stimulus package, where did it go? Why is our infrastructure still 100 years old in many places? So the accountability is just not there. And that smacks of corruption, probably corruption that has never come out. I'm really hoping that it will, on a large and mass scale. The Trump camp opposes socialism for a different reason. Their reasons for opposing socialism are because it interferes with the human spirit of entrepreneurialism. Now you say, well, that's just an excuse. That's the excuse that's been used to not take care of our citizens, our lowest and most vulnerable and helpless citizens, for forever, right? And then we use socialism, or the Republicans use socialism to scare people into voting against their own interests, right? Well, let me say that it's not as simple as that, really. People say, well, why are we the only country in the world, the civilized world, that for which healthcare is so expensive and it bankrupts people? Okay, we will tackle that. I mean, there's a reason. You have one thing. You have high prices and high costs of healthcare. Then you have who is providing the healthcare. Then you have healthcare competition. There are many, many factors. And also, we need to talk about our most vulnerable citizens, who should obviously be cared for, always, and we can call that the safety net, versus a giant section of the population that is able-bodied, is not a victim, is not vulnerable or weak, but has just been ignored and underserved, such as the Latino and Black youth that Bloomberg was talking about. But I don't see it as skin color, because there are white youth in different states who fit that socioeconomic category as well. And I bet you, if you took a study and you saw how many white people were in jail who were poor, you would see it was disproportionate as well. That's because the wealthy buy their own brand of justice. So there's going to be fireworks. And another thing that's so interesting is that, I don't know if you know this, but when Abraham Lincoln was nominated, I believe he wasn't even on the ballot when the Democratic Convention happened. He was a dark horse candidate. He did have the Lincoln-Douglas debates, but I think that was another time, or maybe earlier in the race. But what happened was, this is documented, the Lincoln campaign built enthusiasm for him by printing 5,000 counterfeit tickets to the Republican convention and packing the place with Lincoln supporters, bringing him in as a dark horse candidate and kind of steamrolling over the whole process. Well, we all know it ended up well in the end. I mean, honestly, to get the Emancipation Proclamation done probably would have taken an act, a kind of a sideways backdoor act, because that's the way the evil ones have played for so long. They always backdoor everything. They were not going to give the slaves their freedom. They were going to claim states' rights. They were going to claim financial burden. They were going to claim their property. And so Lincoln came in and, the Democrats boycotted his inauguration. And because of just the rumor of possibly, taking away their property, their human chattel property, they were preparing for secession. So it's really, really tricky and difficult to deal with an enemy that always covers its own tracks, that keeps doing the same old thing. You got the Boy Scouts declaring bankruptcy, and they're trying to basically have a deadline for the payouts to former Boy Scouts who've been abused by scout leaders. They have records of just hundreds and thousands of these cases. They've been paying out settlements. But it's like, now we're saying, okay, it takes a long time for victims to come forward, so this is just basically violating victims' rights, and I agree. And yet the overarching question I have in my mind is, why are we talking about money? A boy gets abused and no one goes to jail, and then 30 years later he gets millions of dollars. Something is really wrong in our society, but I'm really hoping that the courageous among us will have the strength to continue to look for the real truth behind everything, and to ask ourselves, why is it that when we have a major expose and a bust, then gradually everything kind of just congeals again to business as usual. Business as usual. And right now we have women who are being assaulted, sexually assaulted right this minute. We have boys and girls who are being sexually assaulted right this very minute. We have crimes that are being committed right this very minute. And so we have to band together to agree that we are not going to allow loopholes anymore. That we are going to hold ourselves and others to a higher standard. Back to socialism. There have been a lot of videos coming out about Cuba and Venezuela, and talking about how whenever you decide you're going to completely restructure your government and your society to take from the rich and give to the poor, they're saying it never works, and that you end up having a government elite who are the only ones who can get meat to eat, and the only ones who don't have to stand in line. Now that did happen in the Soviet Union, and it is happening in Cuba, and it is happening in Venezuela. But then people say, well, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a benevolent democratic socialism like Sweden. Well, I looked into Sweden, and Sweden is unique, actually, because apparently for 100 years before 1970, Sweden had steady economic growth and prosperity, and it was a capitalist system. In 1970, they formed a welfare state, and then apparently in the early 90s, they had to start pulling back from that. For instance, I guess people were taking, like 80% of the population was taking way too much sick time, and they had to pull that back. And they also have a healthcare system where everyone has access to healthcare, but you can also feel free to choose your own doctor. And so they also have just a tremendous work ethic that they've cultivated over a long period of time, and they also have a lot of capital that they were able to use, like from all of that private enterprise that they were able to use for the welfare state. And so they're not really comparable to the United States. And here's the reason that saying you're going to provide benefits to everyone, even able-bodied people, is dangerous. And dangerous not in the way of fear-mongering, but it stifles freedom, and it stifles competition. It really does. When businesses are free to come up with new ideas and they don't bump up against really difficult regulations where it takes 5 years to build something, such as happens in California, the economy slows down. Now, you say these regulations are good. Yes, they are good, but often, very often, they don't make sense when it comes to individual cases or small business. And for some reason, it's just so hard to get a common sense approach. President Trump slashed a lot of regulations. I know some of them got attention because they were like, there was one about the streams near the coal mines. But what's interesting is that the regulation that was rolled back was only made in December of 2016 when Obama was a lame duck president. So it's like, well, if Obama thought this was so important, why didn't he do this earlier? I don't know. That's just one individual example. But another thing I always wonder is, Main Street versus Wall Street, right? Wall Street won after the 2008 housing crisis. Wall Street always wins. Why is it that every president, when they get in, they talk about helping small business and alleviating their tax burdens? Payroll tax is enormous. Why is it that they talk about it, but then they pretty much ignore small business? I mean, sure, I'm sure they had programs, various programs along the road, but on a whole, small business is ignored, and they produce more jobs than corporations do. So it just makes you wonder, well, why are we lumping small business and business owners in with corporations and the people who invented this diabolical mortgage-backed securities situation? It makes people want to go to a savior like Bernie Sanders. So we are really in a pickle because, you have Elizabeth Warren. She really got tough on the Wells Fargo chairman when there was that scandal a couple years ago. She yelled at the Wells Fargo chairman, and that got a lot of airtime, and people thought, yeah, that's what we need. But she's never been a businesswoman. You know what I learned when I started really trying to figure out what makes Republicans tick is that there are so many hardworking people who pay their way and plan and produce and feel good about themselves and give jobs to other people, who are never, ever talked about in the media, ever. In fact, they're vilified. They're vilified for taking responsibility for their own credit, building up credit, getting loans, and doing things, quote, the right way. I used to think, well, they just probably had inheritances from daddy. Well, there are plenty of people who have inheritances from daddy who blow that money as well. But getting back to the main core concept of what makes what makes America actually great. And it's something that never gets talked about because people always want to talk about race, and they want to talk about race for the wrong reasons. Mike Bloomberg was talking about minorities being the most in the prisons, and these young males and minority males. He can't look beyond skin color. This is a socioeconomic issue. This is about the fact that I believe our leaders have been scared to death of African Americans on a whole becoming a thriving group that is not a victim, that are business owners using their ingenuity and feeling part of and integrated into our society. And they're just deathly afraid of them, and they can't get past the skin color. Whereas it seems like now there's a huge movement of Republicans and Black Republicans who have decided they don't want to be a victim. They don't want to be in a welfare state. They don't just want handouts. Sure, they want free college, perhaps, or better scholarships and opportunity. But you know what? We just want to get rid of the attitude of ignoring the lifeblood and the backbone of America, which is hardworking people. And another thing that I find is that in the national media, what's often ignored is the vast majority of cases that are success stories. For instance, when an unaccompanied minor comes across the border, most of those cases are happy endings, a better place for people. And that's when the system works. And same thing with small businesses. The problem is it's the horrible thing that happens is always viewed as the norm. So let's look at that as we continue to share complete facts, zoom in on the story, realize that corruption is actually the thing that's holding us down, not racism. Racism is there, but it's corruption. And really, where is the racism? The real racism, it seems to me, overtly, is on the side of Governor Ralph Northam, Governor Blackface, as they called him at the Virginia rally for the Second Amendment. They were calling him Governor Blackface. These were African-American gun owners. And Mike Bloomberg. I could not believe what I was hearing. But there is a tradition among Democrats where they're just scared to death of African Americans as a group, and they just want their vote, and they never do anything for them. So when you see the media backing Mike Bloomberg, you know why. They don't want to lose. They're part of the establishment, or they're following the trend of the more influential media people and their influencers, think tanks, etc., who don't want to lose control to a Bernie Sanders. Is Bernie Sanders the answer? He's pretty simplistic, actually, but he's making a very, very good point. Do I think that he can get elected? Well, I actually don't. That's why I think that the Democratic Party is in a real pickle right now. They got to find somebody who's not just some sort of, excuse my language, ass hat misogynist that they're trying to now have with a patina on, well, if Trump can do it, he can do it. And it's a real mess. So stay tuned. I don't know what's going to happen. Where are our people? Where are our inspired leaders? Where are the women? It's fine if a woman really leads with the experience and the ability to be charismatic, then please, let's do it. If it's a white male, let's do it. But a white male who praises Cuba and praises socialism and has never really owned a business, or a white male who's created a bunch of jobs, who is genuinely racist, genuinely has a record on tape of criticizing Black people for their skin color, we're in trouble. All right, this is a long one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.